force abroad. I don't think he can sustain, and again, given what has already happened and given the contrast between it and his messaging, I think he has incredibly little cushion to politically sustain any kind of reversals, whether it's casualties, damage in the region, or even a sustained increase in oil prices. I mean, this is not, we are only 8 months from the election. He was elected above all, far and away, because people thought he was going to solve their cost of living problems. And at the least, he has now another month that he's burning up toward the election where he's not going to see any progress of that. Collapse of the Iranian regime, that might help him. Anything short of that, I think, is a question of mitigating the damage.
Well, and Charles Blow, let's watch what his vice president, Vance, had to say about this last night, because if there was anybody that was stronger in their seeming opposition to starting another forever war, if there was anyone who was even louder than President Trump about keeping the United States out of foreign entanglements, it was J.D. Vance. Let's watch what he said last night.
What is different about President Trump, and it's frankly different about both Republicans and Democrats of the past, is that he's not going to let his country go to war unless there's a clearly defined objective. It's pretty clear, it's pretty simple, and I think that means that we're not going to get into the problems that we've had with Iraq and Afghanistan.
So he says that the objective has been defined. We are not going to get into the problems that we have had with Iraq and Afghanistan. The problem with that is George W. Bush didn't want to get into the problems that we got into in Iraq and Afghanistan.
But even George W. Bush felt compelled to come before the American people and to try to explain, whether or not you agree with it or not, to give the American people that benefit and that respect of the voters and the citizens. This is a president who's acting like he's not responsible to the voters and the citizens, who acts like he can do whatever he wants and just, kind of give his explanation through indirection. Telephone interviews with reporters, an offhanded comment at another an event for another event, or Marco Rubio flip-flopping all over the place. That is part of the damage here. But whether or not he even accepts that he can be damaged by changing American opinion is what this is exposing.
Yeah, so, one really important piece of this, so part of what has made Donald Trump such a dominant figure in our politics for the last decade is one of those things he said way back in 2016 when he was first running, which is that he could walk down Fifth Avenue, shoot someone, and his supporters would still be with him. So it really begs the question, where are his strongest supporters on this particular action? So let's start with Megyn Kelly, Eric Prince, Tucker Carlson, all in a row, and then we'll take a look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. But let's start with those first three.
I've got serious doubts about what we're doing. I support the president. I voted for the president. I campaigned for the president, as you know. But that doesn't mean, and being a conservative or being a Trump supporter or being part of MAGA does not mean you have to accept another Middle East war without questions. And anybody who tells you that can suck it.
I'm not happy about the whole thing. I don't think this was in America's interest.
The public doesn't support it, and it's terrible for the United States.
Tucker Carlson, right there. It's terrible for the United States. Now let's watch Marjorie Taylor Greene, who appeared on Megyn Kelly's show to talk about this. Watch.
We're a year in, and we're in another fucking war, and we've got American troops being killed. I think it's time for America to rip the Band-Aid off, and we need to have a serious conversation about what the fuck is happening to this country and who in the hell are these decisions being made for, and who is making these decisions.
Well,
I guess. What do you really
feel?
think?
I know.
But to Charles's point, I mean, this is really significant. I mean, how he has gone to war, I think, is as significant as the fact that he has done it at all. He really has offered less explanation to the public than any president taking the country into a conflict of this magnitude. And as you see, it's not only Democrats who feel that they are adrift. It is some core Republican conservative voices. Now, look, rank and file Republicans, they are going to stay behind Donald Trump initially. But as our colleague Aaron Blake wrote on CNN today, CNN.com, they are not as strongly in favor of this as you might expect. They are kind of tolerating, I think, across the political. Look, the public was not on board to begin with. He has made only the most cursory effort to convince them that this is worthwhile, and therefore he is extraordinarily vulnerable to any kind of reversal.
Okay, the clowns you just showed are all part of this fake circus that is just, it's not the representation of Republican voters. Our CNN's own polling yesterday came out, said 77% of Republicans support it. I have
Do you think Republicans and MAGA voters are the same? When you talk, because there are Republicans who vote in midterms, right? And then there's Republicans and MAGA voters who show up when Trump's on the ballot.
Well, I can tell you that survey I have says that people who are very favorable to Donald Trump, the people who are deepest in his camp, they're 96% in favor of this. They're more so than even the rest of the party is.
Sure.
But this is not unusual. In 2011, Republicans were far more likely to support Barack Obama's attacks on Libya than Democrats were. 73% of the Tea Party in CNN's polling backed Obama in Libya. This is really the parallel, is Libya and not Iraq. Libya was a swift action. It took out a government that was problematic in exporting terrorism, rendered them incapable of doing that again. That's the model for what President Trump's doing.
But I think that we're in the
Still kind of a
afterglow
mess
of
there.
a Venezuelan sugar high where we think we can have one action very quickly, accomplish the goal, and get out. And I think that, a lot of America now, and I think this is actually, part of this is part of the Obama years, using drones to such a degree, but we are now in this kind of idea that we can have a way more warfare, that we can do it remotely, autonomously. We're not involved. Not a lot of people are going to get killed, and we're going to get in and get out. But the Iranians have a strategy.